Hi, I'm Don Walkner, President of eData Law Group, LLC, and today we are continuing our forensics podcast series designed to explain to you how it is that eData Law Group on the forensic side helps clients, attorneys, corporations, and otherwise, how we help them to investigate, identify, and anticipate confronting, either through civil lawsuits or criminal referrals, etc., people that are causing harm to them. We will have another series of podcasts hosted primarily by my business partner Hayden Richard on how the digital safety group side of the company insulates, manages, and reports the manner in which devices are being used. And that side basically talks to parents, teenagers, etc., making people safer. We, therefore, are talking about the forensic side, which is the iron fist inside the velvet glove. In order to appreciate today's podcast, we want to now conceive of the fact that in prior podcasts, I explained to you basically why it is that individual devices make interesting witnesses. We talked a little bit about the three old guys in every device. If you don't know what that is, go back and take a look at the podcasts about individual devices. In this podcast, we're taking a look at the fact that devices talk to one another, and that when they talk to one another, that action, that activity of devices talking to one another produces another layer of data, another layer of information, which itself may be really helpful in a matter. So let's just take a look at how that happens. So now we're focusing not on what's true about the device, nor are we looking necessarily at the device or the computer. We're not doing a forensic examination of those devices. We're doing either forensic examinations, sometimes of servers, or even of data analytics, where we're extracting the way in which and the manner in which devices have communicated with one another. And in order to do that, let's take a quick look-see at two people, John Gotti and Sammy the Bull Gravano. John Gotti, I assume all of you know, is now dead, but he was convicted of being a organized crime figure. And Sammy the Bull Gravano, he was very instrumental in that conviction, used to be a member of the alleged mob, and allegedly betrayed John Gotti. But let's take a look at how that investigation could have proceeded, comparing the idea of people as your primary source of information versus data, electronic information, and digital information. And let's think about this. Let's pretend that we're all investigative agents for some agency, and what we've been told to do is to monitor Gotti and Sammy the Bull. And in order to do that, because we are now have our people hat on, we're thinking, okay, well, to monitor somebody, and all I want to do is they're people, I want to surveil them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a series of cameras. I'm going to try to bug places with listening devices. But one of the things I'm definitely going to do is I'm going to take a logbook, and I'm going to monitor and write down the activities of these people day to 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 day. And so, for example, let us say, just to pretend that every day at 5 o'clock, a limousine pulls up or a car pulls up in front of a particular supper club. John Gotti gets out of the car. Almost immediately behind that car, another car pulls up, and Sammy the Bull gets out of that one. The two men hug one another in the street and then walk into the supper club. And we write that down in our book. 5:02, John Gotti arrives. 5:04, Sammy the Bull arrives, hug in the street, walk into the supper club. And we write that down. And they do that on Monday, and on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, and on Thursday, and on Friday, and on Saturday. And they do that month after month after month. And we keep writing it down diligently in our little book. One day, John Gotti arrives, gets out of the car. Sammy the Bull Gravano arrives, gets out of his car. Sammy the Bull walks towards John Gotti with his arms outstretched, and John Gotti hauls off and punches him as hard as he can, it looks like, in the head. Sammy the Bull falls down to the pavement. Gotti gets in his car and drives away. Sammy gets up, broken nose or what have you, gets in his car and drives away. Now, all of that is fictitious, but what it is designed to do is to show you whatever has occurred is different. We write down in the book. Maybe we even mark it in red. Something happened. This is an anomalous set of data. Our database to this point in time was pretty darn straightforward. They all got out of the car, they hugged one another, going to the supper club. But now we have an anomaly. Because I have scarce resources in the world, rather than investigate what was John Gotti and Sammy the Bull Gravano doing before each dinner, going back months after months after months, what I'm going to suggest a good investigative approach would obviously be, let's investigate what happened before one punched the other. What was going on? Why is this an anomalous data set? And indeed, what we see when devices talk to one another is, in order to speak to one another, devices either have to communicate content, communicate information, or they have to communicate through other devices like towers or what have you, so they can connect. Those are called protocols. And so for my cell phone to talk to you, I got to go through not only one, but maybe several towers. For Bluetooth to work, we got to go through Bluetooth systems and sometimes through routers. We got to go through all kinds of different things. Phones have to be within a certain distance to one another to do Bluetooth, because it's really like radio waves are close to one another. So the question becomes, for devices to speak to one another, and in the environment in which they do speak to one another, is that environment provide us some kind of information as well? We know when humans talk to one another, we can see hands, gestures, facial expressions, etc., and we mark all that down. But now when devices talk to one another, is there something to be seen? And the answer to that is absolutely. And one of the places in which we spend a tremendous amount of time and energy is looking at communication systems in which one device communicates with another device, let's say through email. The same can be true through instant messaging or otherwise, but let's just talk about email temporarily. Now, you may like this. When people communicate via email, one way to think about that is many times they're, especially corporate emails, they're trapped in a communication box. If you worked for Enron, for example, and you were using the Enron email system, you would be on the Enron email system, period, and you can read and download, if you'd like, the entire Enron email system by simply Googling Enron email, FERC, F-E-R-C, and you will be taken to a place where the entire Enron email system was placed on the internet after it had been cleansed of things like social security numbers and stuff like that, in order that people could see and conduct social networking experiments with communication systems in a company that we know was doing something wrong. So think about this. We have a timeline for Enron that you can look at. We know when the investigation began. We know when people allegedly were doing things wrongly. We know when people were arrested. We know when they were walked out of the building. We know when they were prosecuted. We also have got now this gift called the Enron email system. And we can take a look at the Enron email system and see what the heck were people talking about during the time when they didn't know anything bad was happening, when there were rumors of investigation, when the FBI arrested somebody, when they looked like there was a danger of bankruptcy or shutdown, when they were being told, don't worry about it, etc. We can see what people were saying to one another and read it if that's what we'd like to do. And we could try to put all this content into a big monster spreadsheet and try to figure out what the heck can we extract from this information if we were to look at a corporate email system during a period of time when the corporate email system reflects an environment under stress. That's basically what we're looking at. And one of the tools that we've got is to not read every email. That'll all drive us crazy. But it's graphic visualizations. And you can read about and you can play with graphic visualizations with your own email system. You can download some free social network analysis, SNA. I think I have a, yep. You can, there's an exploring social network analysis with Pajak, P-A-J-E-K. Pajak is a type of system that produces these types of graphs when it is allowed access to email systems or other type of systems. It produces visualizations of the relationships of information and communication patterns amongst humans. At the network level, when devices talk to one another, not only do they share content, but the act of speaking to one another means that they must communicate through other devices like towers or servers, etc. Now, email systems themselves, as I've pointed out to you, email systems are really quite phenomenal because we can trap all that information inside a set of servers, and because we've been given a sample of that information by FERC, Federal Energy Commission and Regulatory Commission, and we can then explore the Enron email system. And if we use different tools, we can take almost any corporate email system and expand that email system and analyze that email system by asking the tools in effect to do the following. Put somebody in the center, and you can do this for yourself. There, by the way, some free tools that allow you to do this. Put yourself in the center, and then ask the software, please designate with little symbols, designate the people I communicate to, designate the people I receive communications from, clump or bring the people I communicate with frequently or communicate over long periods of time, like maybe infrequent but long discussions, clump them closer to me. People I communicate with less frequently or communicate for long periods of time but only once in a while, push them off to the side. In effect, give me a visualization so that when I look at it, I can see who my friends are, what cliques I belong to, etc. Now, this is really quite helpful if you can also define a period of time when your communications were under stress. As an example, if somebody dies in your family or you get a medical diagnosis, etc., it is natural for you to turn, or if you're doing at work, for example, if somebody you knew got fired or hurt or injured, it's especially useful to know that most humans, when they communicate with one another during times of stress, they tend to communicate more with trusted sources than they do with untrusted sources. And indeed, IBM has known this for quite some time, and for years and years, IBM has conducted on its email systems different analyses designed to identify disgruntled employees. Designed to identify disgruntled employees both by their communication pattern as well as sometimes by the words and the expressions they use. And they mine that information and attempt to interdict behavior before it becomes problematic. So in our example, when we're talking about network as a witness, we're going to pretend, give you an idea of why this is so helpful, pretend this was the San Bernardino bomber's phone. And we have the San Bernardino's call log. Now we stopped there for a moment. In order to get the call log, we had to break through the phone, and that may become the subject of yet another podcast when we go through some of the details of encryption, et cetera, and why it's important to know something about that in a digital world as well. But for our purposes, we need to note that we needed to get to the phone, we needed to identify we've got this phone, and in an ideal world, we would have already had in a database someplace all the phone calls made by all the cell phones to all the people, hopefully in the world. Now, we're not going to listen to all those phone calls, but we'd like at least the metadata for all of them. And if you want to do some research, you'll see that NSA back in the day, before the Patriot Act, was building such a database. And by reason of the Patriot Act, it would appear, subject to more validation, but it would appear that a metadata database of all cell phone communications, perhaps even on the entire globe, is maintained by telecommunications under the Patriot Act, etc. In any event, what we want for our purposes is, I want to be able to take a set of calls that were made from San Bernardino guy and compare that and identify who's he calling. And in order to do that, I can grab the call numbers from the phone, but then I want to put it into a graphical interface so I can see not only who did he call, that would be a spreadsheet, he called this number, this number, this number, yeah, what good is that? Another column, he spoke this much time. I want to see this stuff fast. Well, this will help us see that. And if this were the case, and I were looking to determine where do I do my next investigative step? I've already got the San Bernardino guy, I've got his phone. Now I'm looking for any cells, anybody accomplices, anybody that's helping him. And this can be true about anything. This can be a partner leaving a law firm. Is he taking people with him? This could be somebody who's already left, months ago, and is somebody left behind that's helping them? On and on and on. This communication pattern does nothing more than tells me that here are the people that San Bernardino bomber seems to trust, seems to communicate with. Not so much these people, but here is a person that they've communicated with enough that it's close to them, but that person's kept all these communications separate. That could be maybe another cell. This could be the head of sales. That could be your head salesman, saleswoman. Is that head salesperson, are they getting ready to leave? If they leave, are they taking all these people with them? Why aren't these communications passing through to the corporation? Is this person acting as if they own these people versus the company? On and on. The nice thing about graphical interpretation and graphical analysis of closed systems like this email system is they begin to produce business intelligence for legitimate reasons, both investigative and otherwise. So as we take a look at this and we decide, well, now this is really quite fascinating to us, what else can we say about it? What else can we do with this information? Well, once we've identified that this person may indeed have some information associated with what's going on, then we can do the traditional speaking to people, figuring out what they say, and we have some knowledge about whether or not they've ever communicated, if so, how frequently, et cetera, et cetera. Social network analysis, which you can do on your own systems, which you can do for free, which is kind of fun to do, to be honest with you, produces business intelligence. The next thing you can do is, this is a slice in time. I created this graph at a particular time on a particular day. Suppose I wait an hour and do another one. Suppose I wait an hour and do another capture, another hour, another hour. Suppose I do that over several months. I can actually make a movie associated with the changes in communication patterns amongst the humans comprised within the Enron email system over time, and by goodness, there are such movies on YouTube. You can watch that happen. Well, in your own company, you can do the same thing. And you can begin to extract information about supervisors, about conflict. You can begin to extract information about a lot of things that are going on inside the company, all done without ever reading an email and just figuring out what that information might be telling us. So email systems at this side are really helpful. And in order to see how that works, how do these email systems show up? How do we know people are communicating with one another? What's happening between one device talking to another device? What I want to introduce you to is another freebie, and that's called Wireshark. Wireshark is great. It's free. You got to be able to play with Wireshark a little bit. You can download it. You won't hurt your computer downloading it. And I want you to think of Wireshark as it's nothing more than the following. Your computer has in effect, it has a radio receptor in it. Your computer, when it receives Wi-Fi, it's really receiving like radio stations. And it's receiving all of them. Now, the only ones you're interested in are the radio stations that are calling your computer for a reason. But as your computer sits in a room, it's hearing, if you will, the requests, the radio requests of every computer that's near you, routers, on and on, what's going on, et cetera. So when a computer, let's say, calls a bank, the computer yells out, okay, on the computer, the computer itself, operating system, needs to go to a server called a DNS server, and it's got to tell the DNS server, I'm trying to get to Chase Bank, and it's got to get the IP address so it can use that IP address to connect to Chase Bank. Well, all Wireshark does, it's a little bit like saying, I want to capture and record in a spreadsheet every Wi-Fi, wireless Wi-Fi communication, request, acknowledgement, validation. I want to record them so that I can look at them. So just as an example, so we can see on this sampling of Wireshark is we can see we've got a time, we've got a source IP address, so we can see here's a computer, 192.168.1, this is 254, that's just a device number, and this computer here has asked or has sent out a wireless communication to a different computer at 192, or has asked a different computer for a DNS lookup to require a name of Google. So what's kind of neat here is we say, oh, that's kind of fun. This computer is asking to be connected to Google. And when Google responds, there's a TCP, HTTP request, etc. There's acknowledgement requests. There's all kinds of neat stuff that happen here. Signals are syncing, acknowledged, etc. They're finalizing. You can actually look up what all this means by looking at Wireshark and playing with it a little bit in your own house. You can start with just knowing nothing. It downloads for free. You launch it, and here's just a couple of things you need to do. You may need to go into your computer and change the settings on your Wi-Fi, and it'll tell you how, so that you can gather all this information. But when you hit it and start it to record information, only let it run a little while. I've made a few of these while in an airport, and it's shocking. If you let this thing run like 3 minutes in an airport, sometimes you get thousands of pages of stuff right away. There's so much information being pulled out of the air. It's nothing more than computers yelling at each other. Hey, I need to connect to Chase Bank. Chase Bank going, yep, I've got you. I don't know who the heck you are. Messages coming back and forth, etc. And the beauty of this is, while this initially lists all these messages in the order in which they come into your computer, once you've captured a hunk, say for 5 or 6 minutes, you can then order them by sending computer. So you can then go and follow one computer and what it sent, what it received, and what those messages mean right here. And you can do a little bit of research, and what you'll find out is, and you'll read a little bit about the handshake. You know, one computer says, hey, I want to connect to you. And the other one says, hey, who are you? Yes, I want to connect. They sync, they handshake. Yep, we acknowledge one another. And then the communication is made. And you'll see that right here. What that means is, remotely, I want to prove that I was connected to my law firm's computer during a critical period of time. I was working from home. I was connected. How might I do that? I know this stuff here may have been logged by the servers, logged maybe even by my computer. This is the act of communicating. This is me calling somebody and doing something at a particular time. That's what this does. That's what this proves. Now the question is, this is being pulled out of the air in real time. Has any of this been logged anywhere? Have logs been turned out? Is there a device called a server sitting in the law firm or in your corporation that logs all this? Because Wireshark is used by lots of IT people. They log all this and they never look at it. They log it all and never look at it. Why? Because the logs are there to help us if something goes wrong with the network. If something happens, we can then go back in and look at the logs during that critical period of time and figure out what might have occurred. Is there something in this logs telling me what happened? And maybe this is where I see, oh, we got hit by an attack where bunches of computers tried to get access to our service all at the same time, or we got hit by somebody accessing a computer and it looks like they tried to work around or do something in order to get past our firewalls or whatnot. These log files become very, very helpful diagnostic logs after the fact. For our purposes, because they grow so much, frequently we don't keep logs for a long period of time. But for our purposes, in an electronic digital world in which we're trying to both keep up with and identify those things that might be important to us in terms of who the witnesses are, how we conduct an investigation, how to identify people, transactions, and communications of interest, how are we driven by the evidence to the people we want to be driven to for purposes of confrontation, civil or criminal, etc. How do we do that? We rely on this kind of information. And how do you benefit from just knowing it exists? Is you can better see the environment in which you live and better see the environment in which you work and start to play with this a little bit. This is kind of fun even to play with at home. See how it is that your system's working. How's your router? To identify what device number is the TV, what device number is X, Y, and Z, and it also help you identify what is hitting my system that maybe I don't know anything about. And you can do some stuff by looking in the router after a while. You get used to that. Accessing the router, this will tell you what your router number is. You type it into the URL, you type in the correct router address, you launch the right software, you can see in the router, you can see where you can see what all the devices are that are supposed to be on your network, and you can see, is there something on my network that's not supposed to be there? We get lots and lots and lots of cases where spouses are doing things, or exes are doing things, or boyfriends are doing things, and one of the things they do is they plant something inside a home or inside a company, and that is revealed as you get in and take a look at what is this device that has a number associated with it that I don't recognize, and you begin then to delve in, at least knowing what's on my system and what can we do with it. And as part of all that, the fun part about network communications and networks as witnesses is that there's all kinds of devices that are used to transfer this information that's being recorded here. There's all kinds of devices that are used. They're not all used in one environment, but if all you know is this is the language in effect in which computers say hello to one another, if that's what you know from this, then you can at least begin to figure out, well, in my company, what are the devices that this information goes through? And what is those devices that I should be aware of? And you don't need to become an expert or forensically analyze those devices. You just need to know they're there, because maybe just knowing this, when something goes wrong, maybe one call ought to be made to the IT department right away and ask them, do you have log turned on? And if not, turn them on right away, or if you do, preserve them so we can see what the heck's going on in the future if that becomes important. So this gives you another brief overview. None of these podcasts are going to make you a forensic expert, but certainly I hope all of them are going to make you go, I can't believe all this stuff is going on invisibly behind the fact. The next one that we're going to be talking about is why cell phones themselves make such great witnesses. And I hope that you're enjoying this series. If you are, give us some feedback, etc. At the beginning of each one, you've got my contact information. If you ever got any questions or anything, feel free, give me an email. Yeah, you always can call. If I can answer, I will answer it at the time. We talk to people all the time, and some of it ends up in terms of business, and most of it does not. Give people some ideas as they go along. Look forward to seeing you at the next seminar.